Okay, let me tell you a story. In 1968, you could walk into a Pan American ticket office and reserve a seat to the moon. 93,000 people signed up. That's how untouchable this airline felt. Pan Am wasn't just an airline, it was American air travel. The flying blue globe, the crisp uniforms, the sky gods. Kings flew it, movie stars flew it. It carried the first paying passengers across the Atlantic and the Pacific. And then, on December 4th, 1991, it simply stopped. Every plane grounded, 50,000 people out of work. A company that once ruled the skies, gone. So how does the most famous airline on Earth go completely bankrupt? This is the rise and fall of Pan Am. So, how did this all begin? It started with a single mail route. October 19th, 1927. A hired float plane took off from Key West, Florida, carrying mail 90 miles to Havana, Cuba. That was Pan Am. One route, one plane. But behind it was a man with an almost impossible level of ambition. Juan Trippe. Trippe didn't want to run an airline. He wanted to run the airline. America's flag carrier to the entire world. And in the 1930s, while other airlines fought over domestic routes, Trippe did something nobody else dared. He bet everything on crossing oceans. He bought giant flying boats, the famous Clippers, and pushed them across the Pacific to China and across the Atlantic to Europe. At a time when an ocean crossing meant days on a ship, Pan Am did it in hours. Trippe was building something no government had, a private airline with a near monopoly on international travel. And Trippe kept betting on the future before it arrived. Pan Am was the first to fly the pressurized Boeing Stratoliner. First to jump into the jet age with the Boeing 707. Every time aviation took a leap forward, Pan Am was the one that pushed it off the ledge. By the 1960s, Pan Am wasn't a company, it was a symbol. The Pan Am logo showed up in movies, on the tallest building in New York, in the opening of 2001, A Space Odyssey. If you flew Pan Am, you had made it. Now here's where it gets wild. This is the top of the mountain, and it's where the seeds of the fall get planted. Because in 1965, Trippe made his biggest bet yet. He walked into Boeing and essentially dared them to build a plane twice the size of anything flying. The Boeing 747, the jumbo jet. Pan Am was the launch customer. Trippe ordered 25 of them before the plane even existed. It was a stunning, iconic move. The 747 would define air travel for the next 50 years. But think about what he just did. He committed Pan Am to hundreds of millions of dollars in the biggest, most expensive planes on Earth, betting that demand would keep climbing forever. Those planes only make money when they're full, and Trippe assumed they always would be. That assumption that the good times couldn't end is the crack that everything else pours through, because the good times were about to end, all at once. Okay, so everything's perfect, right? 1973. The oil crisis hits, fuel prices explode. And who's most exposed? The airline, flying the biggest, thirstiest planes on the longest routes, burning imported fuel. By the end of the decade, oil hit nearly $40 a barrel. Pan Am's costs went vertical, right as those giant 747s were flying half empty. Then came the knockout setup, 1978. The US government deregulates the airlines. Overnight, the rules that had protected Pan Am's turf disappeared. New competitors could fly anywhere, charge anything. And here's Pan Am's fatal weakness. For 50 years, it had only been allowed to fly internationally. It had almost no domestic routes inside America. So when deregulation let competitors build huge domestic networks that fed passengers straight into international flights, Pan Am had no feeder network. It was an international airline stranded without a home base. So Pan Am panicked. In 1980, it bought national airlines to grab a domestic network fast and got dragged into a bidding war, overpaid, and inherited a messy, expensive integration. It added debt and chaos exactly when it could afford neither. Now the death spiral begins. To pay the bills, Pan Am started selling off the very things that made it Pan Am. It sold the Pan Am building in New York. It sold its crown jewel Pacific routes to United. Piece by piece, the empire was being sold for parts to survive one more year. Okay, this next part is hard. And then, December 21st, 1988, the tragedy that broke it. Pan Am Flight 103 was destroyed by a terrorist bomb over Lockerbie, Scotland. 270 people were killed. It remains one of the darkest days in aviation history. Beyond the human tragedy, for the airline it was the final blow. Passenger bookings collapsed. People were afraid to fly Pan Am. The company faced a $300 million lawsuit and government fines for security failings. A brand built on trust and glamour had lost the one thing it couldn't buy back: confidence. In January 1991, Pan Am filed for bankruptcy. It tried to shrink itself into a small carrier flying out of Miami, a shadow of the airline that once ruled the world. It didn't work. On December 4th, 1991, Pan Am's last flight landed and the airline shut down for good. 64 years after that little mail plane left Key West, the flying blue globe went dark. So, what does it all mean? So what actually killed Pan Am? Not one thing. It was an airline perfectly built for a world that stopped existing. It was a global icon with no domestic foundation. It made huge, debt-heavy bets assuming the good times would never end. And when the shocks came, oil, deregulation, tragedy, it had no cushion left to absorb them. Here's the uncomfortable lesson. Being the most famous, most beloved, most iconic name in your industry protects you from nothing. Brands don't die from being unknown. They die from being unable to adapt. Pan Am was too proud, too specialized, and too leveraged to change. And the market doesn't care how legendary you used to be. Pan Am walked so modern aviation could run. Every time you cross an ocean in hours, you're living in the world it built. It just didn't survive to see it. If you want more stories of giants that fell, subscribe. The next one might surprise you. Which company should we cover next? Tell me in the comments.